The portion of Tzav has Tzav psukim, 96 psukim, and the siman, the mnemonic of the portion of Tzav, is also the word Tzav. So what is the meaning of Tzav? And why is it that in the portion of Tzav you have 96 psukim, which is also spelled Tzav? And furthermore, the mnemonic is also the word Tzav. Tzav means a mitzvah, a command. And in truth, in the Torah, we find three terminologies, or three synonyms, that allude to the word command. Number one is daber. God says, speak to the people of Israel. And that speaking is to command them to do a specific thing. And then you have emer, which is say to them to do this and that. And here the Torah introduces the concept of tzav. Tzav means command the people to do this. Now it's true that each one of them, both daber and emer and tzav, all three of these terminologies allude to a mitzvah, a commandment from God. Yet the fact that the word tzav is the closest in sound and spelling, because etymologically a mitzvah, a commandment, is tzav, is a command. Therefore we understand from the three different terminologies, the most related to an actual mitzvah is the term tzav. And therefore we understand that at the opening Rashi's, in this week's Torah portion on the word tzav, Rashi tells us what is the meaning of tzav. Ein tzav ele ziruz miyad uloderis. Says Rashi that the word tzav represents acceleration, to do things quickly, the urgency of being zealous in God's work for now and to repeat it in all generations to come. Because in order for something to be done swiftly and to be done with such energy that it will affect generations to come, it must come from a command from a very, very strong place. In truth, every mitzvah is a command, and in truth the word mitzvah means tzavtza v'chibur, which means connection, because every time we do a mitzvah we are connecting ourselves to God. However, being that there are three levels of mitzvah, there's daber, which means to speak, emer, which means to say, and tzav, which means command. We must say that in these three types of mitzvahs, the mitzvah that one is most connected to God is through the tzav, through the command. Even though, of course, one is connected to God when he follows the speak or the say, daber or emer. However, when one speaks and one says, it's more logic. It's more with heart and emotion. And therefore, I'll fulfill it because it makes sense. Tzav means a command to do it whether you understand it or not. By accepting the yoke of God upon yourself, doing God's will. And therefore, when God sees that you're doing the commandment not because it makes sense, not because you like it, not because it's good for you, but rather because God commanded us to do it, then there's a true tzavtza v'chibur, there's a true connection between God and that individual. There's a famous mashal, a famous parable that is given in Chassidus of a chacham, a wise person, a professor, an absent-minded professor, a great intellect, that in the world of this chacham, in the world of this brilliant individual, all he knows is chachma, all he knows is wisdom. And that's his preoccupation, that's his concern, that's his love. And therefore, an ignoramus, a simpleton, who has no interest in intellect, in the mind of the chacham is totally non-existent. He does not even enter into the world of the chacham because there's no commonality. And the fact that this ignoramus or simpleton does not exist in the world of the chacham, of the intellect, is not because the chacham is arrogant or because the chacham is bad and therefore he negates anyone who's not like him, but simply because they have different interests. And because they have different interests, this individual is inexistent or non-existent. However, now this chacham, this great intellect, needs something. He needs someone to fix his house. He needs someone to paint his house. He needs someone to serve him dinner. All of a sudden, this person, this simpleton, who is non-existent, now becomes important. And he connects with this wise man and they become one. So this is true with two people of flesh and blood. How much more so, this is true with God. In other words, from the simpleton to the great intellect, there are only 5 levels. There's the world of action, the world of speech, the world of thought, the world of emotion, and the world of intellect. So, from the world of intellect, there are 5 steps. So the chacham is 4 levels higher than the person in the world of action. And yet, through that one deed, through that request from the chacham, he becomes one with that individual in the world of action. However, God, as the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, is tens of thousands of levels higher than our intellect. God's intellect is tens of thousands of levels higher than our intellect, to a degree that our intellect compared to God's intellect is considered to be action. Something which is physical. A totally different reality. So surely we don't exist in God's reality. Yet, when God says to us, put on tefillin, God says to us, I need you to light Shabbos candles. God says to us, I need you to celebrate Purim. All of a sudden, we become important. All of a sudden, this non-entity appears. And all of a sudden, God recognizes us in His world. And this also explains the statement that the Talmud says, Af al pi shechata Yisraelu. Even when a Jew sins, he's still called Yisrael. What does that mean? It's not only when we fulfill God's commandment that we are recognized, but the mere fact that there is a commandment, the mere fact that God requests something of us, the mere fact that He needs us to do something, already we are recognized. Already we become important. Even if we violate that commandment, we're still called Yisrael, we're still called a Jew, we're still called important, because you know what? God needs you. So by the mere fact that there's a mitzvah, by the mere fact that God says, I am making this commandment a commandment, already it creates our reality. In other words, it's not fulfillment of the mitzvah that causes us a recognition, but rather the need of the mitzvah already creates that recognition. So in essence, there are 3 different types of mitzvahs. In essence, there are 3 different channels of how we bring God's light into the world. One is through Emor. God says to do the commandment, and that is on the right side. It's out of kindness. And then there's Daber, when God speaks, it's a little tougher. It's on the left side. And then there's Tzav. Tzav is the command itself. He commands us to do something, and that is the central channel. Now, in the human body, we also have 3 channels, 3 pillars: the right hand, the left hand, and the torso. Now, the right hand starts beneath the head, and it ends before the foot. And the same is true on the left side. It starts beneath the head, and it ends before the foot. In contrast to the torso, the central channel, it's higher than the 2 other channels, and it also goes a lot lower than the other 2 channels. And the same is true with the mitzvahs, the commandments that we are commanded from the right channel or the left channel. Number 1, they're limited in their height and their lowness. Number 2, when we do that mitzvah and we channel a light into the world, the light is diminished as it comes down lower and lower. And thirdly, the source of this mitzvah is from the external part of God's crown, which means the external part of God's will. In contrast to a tzav, to a mitzvah that is a command, this comes from a higher and deeper place. It's the central torso, the central channel. And number 2, the light that comes down is never diminished. It's as strong on the bottom as it was on top. And the reason is because it comes from the internal part of God's crown, known as the Baal HaRatzon, the master of the will. And this is the power of Tzav. And because of this, we understand, in order for the mitzvah, in order for the command to effectuate not only the lower levels, but to go down to the deepest and darkest places, it has to be in a way of ziruz, as Rashi said. It has to be like a catapult, with tremendous acceleration and speed and zealousness, so that it does not become weaker as it goes down, but on the contrary, it maintains its speed and power and energy. Not only does this tzav, this mitzvah, come from the deepest part of God's crown, but at the same time, when a Jew fulfills a mitzvah, not because he likes it, and not because it makes sense, but because God commanded us to do it, because it's a tzav, it also penetrates to the deepest part of the soul. And therefore, our connection with God becomes the most meaningful connection and the most deepest connection. This now sheds some light on the second part of the statement of Rashi. Rashi says that, number 1, the terminology of tzav, of commandment, represents acceleration immediately and for all generations. And then he goes on to say that surely in a place where there's a lack or a loss of money, the Torah encourages us to do things with tremendous alacrity. What does that mean? Each detail over here, each terminology in Rashi is very important. When a mitzvah is done with an excitement, with joy, with happiness, it happens now because there's no holding back. Many times you want to do the mitzvah, you would like to do the mitzvah, but you overslept, or you couldn't do it because it was snowing outside. You couldn't do it right now. You wanted to do it, but it didn't actually happen. When you do things with tremendous joy, when you do it with tremendous zeal and excitement, it happens now. Number 2, it impacts all generation. Not only historically, but also spiritually. In other words, you go to a place which is beyond time and space. Because the mitzvah is so powerful, it doesn't stay only now, at this time, in this location, but it has the impact to transcend time and space. So we do it with excitement, And therefore there's no impediment or blockage, and it goes beyond time. Furthermore, in a place where there is a loss of money, the Torah has to give us additional encouragement. What does that mean? That represents the mitzvah of Tzadaqa. Tzadaqa is the one mitzvah that really it puts a hole in your pocket. So comes the Torah and says, you should know, Torah is giving us an additional strength and energy to fulfill this mitzvah. It's giving us additional zeal and encouragement. What's so special about tzedakah? Number one is, tzedakah is the one mitzvah that we do with the entire body. Every mitzvah has a specific limb of the body that you do it with, or is connected to a specific limb or artery of the body. There are 613 commandments, 248 positive, 365 negative. The 248 positive are connected with specific limbs of the body. The 365 negative are connected to arteries of the body. But there's one mitzvah which is above all the rest, and that's tzedakah. And that is a mitzvah connected with every limb and every artery of the entire body. Why? Why is that? Because number one, to earn this money, I stayed up nights, and I sweat, and I cry, and I work hard, and it took me many, many years to make it. And after all this, God says, give it away. Give away 10%. Give away 20%. But it's mine. I work for it. I put time and effort into it. Says the Torah, by doing this, you elevate the entire body. All your energy that you put into the money is now elevated. Furthermore, the food that you could buy with this money is the food and the energy that gives life to your animal soul. And now that you give the money away to God, what you're doing really is you're elevating your animal soul, and you're bringing your animal soul for a sacrifice before God. Number one. Number two is, the money has an effect not only on your animal soul, not only on your body, but the money also has an effect on your place, on your location. Why? Because to make that money, you had to leave your house. You had to go to a store. You had to travel. You went to various places. So now, when you went to those various places and you made the money by traveling to those various places, either by car or through internet, you traveled to other locations. That money was acquired through those locations. And by giving the money to charity, you are not only elevating yourself, but you're also elevating those locations. The sparks that are found in those locations are now becoming holy and elevated through the charity. And therefore, Rashi is very careful on the terminology that he uses. What does he say? In a place where there's a loss of money, implying that tzedakah impacts also the place, also the locations in the world from which you derived and enrich yourself with that money. So therefore, in order to be able to do this, you have to reach in very deep into your soul. You have to go to a place which is known as the internal part of God's crown, to acquire tremendous energy and strength and zeal and alacrity and a surge and a catapult of energy to be able to go in there and pull out that money, pull out that energy, and to give it to tzedakah. And that is the real tzav, and that is the real commandment of God, because that's the most difficult. It's easy to eat gefilte fish on Shabbos. It's very easy to eat matzah on Pesach. It's delicious on Machaya. But to put your hand deep into your pocket and to give tzedakah, this is something which is very difficult. This concept is connected very much with the idea of Purim and Pesach, because the portion of Tzav is always read either right before the holiday of Purim on a leap year, and it's read right before the holiday of Pesach on a non-leap year. The holiday of Purim has 4 basic mitzvos, 4 basic commandments. Number 1, to hear the reading of the Megillah twice, once at night and once during the day. Number 2, to give 2 ready-to-eat foods to your friend. A bottle of wine, together with some hamantashen, things like that. And then you have a mitzvah to eat and feast royally and to drink a lot of wine. That's also a lot of fun. So the first 3 doesn't really cost you too much, and it's also very enjoyable. Now comes the 4th mitzvah, to give charity to at least 2 poor people. And in truth, even more than 2 poor people, but at least 2 poor people. People I never met before, I don't know who they are, where they're coming from. As the code of Jewish law says, anyone who sticks out his hand on Purim, you don't ask questions, you give money to. The Rambam goes on to say that even though it's a mitzvah to rejoice and to eat and drink on Purim, however, this is incomparable to the greatness of giving charity to the poor people. This is the greatest mitzvah. To satiate and satisfy and have mercy on a poor person that's hungry. And that way you emulate God, who God too gives those that are downtrodden and hungry and poor sustenance and survival. Comes along the Parsha of Tzav and says, you know, it's easy to rejoice, it's even easy to walk into the shul and hear the Megillah, but it's difficult to give the tzedakah to the poor, and therefore Tzav, you should know it's a command. But by doing this command, you are to know that you are truly connected with me, says God. And you go into the deepest places of my soul and my crown, and this will enter into the deepest places of your crown and your soul. And this concept also expresses the idea that we say on Purim, you should get so drunk that you don't know the difference between blessed is Mordechai and cursed is Haman. Now it sounds a bit naive and crazy and even sacrilegious to say you should get so drunk that you don't know the difference between holiness and profanity, between Israel and Torah, and godliness, and hedonism, and ISIS. How can you say that there's no difference? So comes along Chassidus and it says like this. It doesn't literally mean you shouldn't know that this is Haman and this is Mordechai, this is good and this is bad. That's ludicrous. What it means is as follows. That we in our lives have certain preferences. This mitzvah I like to do, that mitzvah I don't like to do. To eat gefilte fish with chrein Friday night, I like to do. But tzedakah is not so easy. To eat matzah on Pesach and have a whole seder is very nice. To light the Hanukkah candles and get Hanukkah gifts, beautiful. But to go and study Torah an hour a day, that's much more difficult. I don't like to do that. One is blessed and one is cursed. One I like, one I don't like. Therefore we say on Purim you should reach such a high level of tzav, such a high level of connectedness with God, that because of that connectedness, you don't choose anymore between what you like, what you don't like. It's a command. I'm going to do it because God wants me to do it. It's interesting to note that the gematria of cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai are both 502. It has both the same gematria. Now take it a step further. We have the portion of Tzav. We have Tzav 96 passages, which is also the word Tzav. Tzav is Tzadik Vav. Tzadik is 90, Vav is 6. And then we have the mnemonic, which is also Tzav. Because really, even though every mitzvah is called a mitzvah, it's called a tzav, a commandment, but there are three types of commandments. There is one that is daber, to speak, one is emer, to say, and one is tzav, which is a command. So you find these three words of tzav at the beginning of the parsha, the name of the parsha, which is tzav, tzav pasukim, and the mnemonic tzav. But really, if you take all these three together, which is, tzav is 96, times 3 is 288. 288 is the amount of rapach netzutzim, 288 sparks that God brought into the world after the shattering of the vessels in the world of chaos. 288 sparks fell down to this world, and our job is to elevate these sparks. How do we do it? By doing the mitzvahs. By doing the tzav, following these commandments, we elevate these 288 sparks. Furthermore, the Gemara asks a question: how do we know Mordechai from the Torah? Even though Purim, the holiday of Purim happened 1,000 years after God gave us the Torah, but everything is found in the Torah. Because the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, is clairvoyant. This was written by God, and it preceded creation. It's the blueprint of creation. God looked into the Torah and created the entire world. So surely the holiday of Purim is in the Torah. Says the Gemara, how do we know Mordechai from the Torah? The Gemara in Chulin, page 139, side B, says, Mordechai min ha-Torah minayin. How do we know Mordechai from the Torah? Says the Gemara, from the words murderer. The Torah tells us in the book of Exodus that there is murderer, which is myrrh, which is a fragrance, a good scent. And this is found all over the place, derer, which is very common. And the Targum says, what is the meaning of murderer? The Uncle says, it's moredachia. From the words moredachia, we have the word Mordechai. So here we see Mordechai is in the Torah. In other words, Mordechai means a good fragrance, which is found all over the place. What is the gematria of moredachia? The gematria of moredachia is 286, plus each word is 1. The kolel is 288. In other words, our job in the world is to bring a good fragrance to God. How do we bring a good fragrance to God? By doing the 288 sparks, by elevating these sparks, by performing the 613 commandments of the Torah. And you say to yourself, well, I'm not Mordechai, only Mordechai can do that. Says the Torah, the word Mordechai means murderer. It's myrrh that is found all over the place. If you just set your mind to it, no matter where you are, in Persia, or in Israel, or in Egypt, or in America, or in Costa Rica, no matter where you find yourself, you could bring this good fragrance to God. In contrast to the word Haman. What is Haman? Haman equals 95. It's 1 short of Tzav. Tzav is 96. Because the 1 represents the one God. Aleph is Aluf Shalolam. Haman was intellectual, he was brilliant, he was smart, but he lacked one thing. He lacked God in his life. He missed the boat. He's only 95, not 96. And therefore, by bringing Aleph into Haman, you transform the cursed is Haman into blessed is Mordechai. And this is the mission of Tzav, to realize that we accept upon ourselves the commandments of God. And that is really the entire lesson of Purim. For 1,000 years, the Jews said that we were forced into it. God put the mountain over our heads on Sinai and he said, keep the Torah, if not, I'm going to make you into mashed potatoes. But 1,000 years later, we said, you know what, God, I would rather die as a Jew than live like Haman. And we accepted upon ourselves the entire Torah. That is why Purim is called Kippurim. It's like the holiday of Purim. Now, Purim was the Day of Atonement that God gave us the second tablets. And here too, on the day of Purim, we accept upon ourselves the entire Torah. And therefore, when Mashiach will come, it says all the other holidays will become minor holidays. But Purim, which is a minor holiday, will become the major holiday. For this is the holiday that we, the Jewish people, created because of our dedication, our love, and our connection to Almighty God. So we hope and pray that this year Purim we will celebrate together with Mordechai and Esther, and together with Mashiach in the Third Holy Temple speedily in our days.